for Carly Jurgensen.
Thanks, Ryan. Well, if I didn't know any better, Father, I would say you must have broken into my house today and read my computer and read through what I wanted to speak about tonight, because no, it's a good thing because you mentioned it and now I get to dive into it. It's a really good thing. And it's kind of the second half of what I want to talk to you about. Firstly, I want to thank you for having me. I'm really grateful to be here, but I'm even more grateful that you showed up. I know you could be a lot of other places, like a storm shelter, for example, but you're here, and I'm really glad, so thank you. But Father mentioned, asking God for big things, and I'm going to touch on that in the second half of what I want to speak to you about. But firstly, I want to tell you a little bit about what I do and how I've experienced God working through me in my career thus far. So the first miracle that I think I experienced in my musical career, which I didn't even see as a miracle until much later, was when my parents moved into a house when I was 3 years old. The previous owners had a piano, and it was sitting in a pretty window. And sorry, does this mic sound kind of annoying? It's a little weird. I was 3 years old at the time. No one in my family played an instrument, but my dad knew that part of the reason my mom loved the house was because you could see this beautiful piano from the street. So when they moved into the house, as a gift for my mom, my dad bought her a grand piano. And this piano became my favorite toy in the house. I played on it for about 5 years before my parents finally decided to send me to a piano teacher. And when I was 8, I started lessons, and I've been playing ever since. And so it, to me, was, in retrospect, a miracle that that piano found its way into my life, because it's now how I make my living and what I love to do most. The second sort of big event that happened in my life happened much later, and there were lots of little miracles along the way, but I don't want to keep you here forever, so I'm going to skip ahead to this whole Mannheim Steamroller chapter. And I want to set this up by telling you what my life was like at the time I got the call. So I was living in New York City. I had been there for 3 years, and life in New York City is wonderful, but the day-to-day, as someone who lives in the heart of Manhattan, is really hard. Walking through the pedestrian traffic and the city traffic, just the loudness, the brightness, and you can get used to that, but I knew that it wasn't a place I was going to be forever. And it's really hard to be in that place in your life where you know this isn't necessarily working, but you don't know what's next. And so God sends me this guy, and I fall in love with him, and he brings me back to Omaha. And I was really sad about leaving New York. It was a really bittersweet moment for me. When Tony, my boyfriend at the time, drove to New York to get me and packed up all my things, and we were driving back to Omaha, I was literally sitting in the car thinking, I don't know what's next. I don't know how I'm going to make a living in Omaha as a musician. I just didn't see much opportunity in that. And yet we have these moments in our lives where we know we're being pulled, but we don't know what's pulling us. We don't know what's on the other end of the rope. And to me, it's one of the ways I define faith, like giving up, needing to know what's at the end of the rope. So I'm sitting in this car, and I should back up and say that a couple months before that, I had returned to Omaha for a wedding, and a friend of mine said, I want you to meet my neighbor. He works for Mannheim Steamroller, and I think you two should meet. And I, of course, was happy to meet him, but I thought, this is not going to be anything for me. I mean, in music school, they teach you, carry your business cards with you, be prepared to meet someone at any moment. And that works, or is true for any profession, I think. So I met Brian, and I gave him my business card, and I said, if you ever need a piano player, let me know. And I really thought I would never see him again. So I'm sitting in this car, fast forward 2 months, sitting in this car with Tony, wondering what's next for my life, and I get a call from Brian, and he said, we were wondering if you would like to play a show with Mannheim Steamroller, and it's kind of a different show. It's going to air on national TV, and we need someone who can sing and play because the guest appearance for this show is David Archuleta, and David Archuleta had just won American Idol. So he called me and asked me if I would sing and play with David Archuleta and Mannheim Steamroller. I was like, absolutely, my schedule is wide open. I'm 100% available for this opportunity. Of course, you don't want to seem too eager. Sure, Brian, let me check, I'll get back to you. No, I was quite sure that I was going to make myself available. So what's so interesting about how it all worked was, right time, right place, and I'm just so confident that those are miracle moments from God. And when I showed up for my first rehearsal with Mannheim Steamroller a month later, Chip Davis happened to be at American Gramophone, which is where they kind of run their operations. And he's not there all the time, so again, kind of just a chance encounter. And I met Chip, which for those of you who don't know, Chip Davis started Mannheim Steamroller about 40 years ago, and he's had this just incredible career, and he's one of the most decorated artists in the recording industry. So you may not have heard of him even though he's based here in Omaha, but his music's a big deal. So getting the call to work with them was really great, and then meeting him was even greater. So anyway, in this meeting, at the headquarters, he says, well, hey, you should come to New York City with us and play in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I just moved away from New York City. I never went to the parade when I lived there because no one who lives there goes to the parade. You know how it is. It's all, no. So he's like, you should come and do the parade with us. I'm like, absolutely, would love to. And then he's like, and then you should come and we do these shows in Orlando. You should come down to Orlando and you should play some shows in Orlando with us. So just by meeting Chip, I then had 6 other jobs lined up, and here I've returned to Omaha. I have no idea how I'm going to make a living, no idea what I'm going to do with myself, and I've just booked myself for the rest of the year. And it was absolutely just one of the most incredible things that happened to me. And people have asked me, how does your faith life play a role in your work with Mannheim Steamroller? And I will tell you that right away, the first thing that comes to mind is that it has made me incredibly grateful. And Eckhart Tolle said that if the only prayer you ever say is thank you, it will be enough. And every time I step out on the stage with Mannheim Steamroller and I see those people, just that sea of people looking back, ready to hear this music that he's created, I say a prayer of thanksgiving for the people that I've met, for the boyfriend who brought me back to Omaha, for the girl who introduced me to Brian. It's these chain reactions of incredible things, and those are the miracles that continue even to this day to provide opportunity for me and allow me to say that I'm a professional musician making a living doing what I love. And the other thing that I've been thinking about recently that I think applies to how my faith life is sort of intertwined in the work that I do with Mannheim is that when I am in Orlando or playing the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, those are very short moments. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, you're on TV for 90 seconds. The shows in Orlando are an hour, and that's it, but we're down there for the whole weekend. But when I get off the plane as one of the keyboard players for Mannheim Steamroller, I'm very clear about the fact that I'm representing the work that Chip has done his entire life. That my interactions with the hotel staff and the caterers and all the sound techs who show up to put on those shows, every person in that audience, I'm just very clear about the fact that it's not my show and it's not about me. And that Chip has worked his entire life to create this incredible enterprise. And he's done this day in and day out for 40 years. And I think that the correlation to my faith is that when we walk out in the world as Christians, it's not about us. We are representing 2,000 years worth of work and passion and sacrifice and love and forgiveness. And so to say that you are a Christ follower in your day-to-day life, it's just interesting to think, how are we demonstrating that? And like Father said, in traffic, in seeing someone as a God, seeing them as God intended them to appear. And it's been really profound for me to realize that. And so I just encourage you in the work that you do, no matter what your profession is, to consider how you can carry your faith if in no other way than seeing people as God intends them to be seen. So the next kind of big miracle moment that happened in my career, and that has sort of taken me into the next phase, is the creation of my nonprofit called Peaceful Preludes. And this was born when my grandmother was dying, and I brought my piano to her bedside, and for a week, in the week that she was preparing to pass away, we sang to her and I played for her. And it brought us such comfort. And the miracle that happened was that I started to see death differently. So we are so scared of it, and we don't have to be. And in these moments with my grandmother where she was at peace and the music brought us peace, I realized that there was an opportunity to share that with other people. So Peaceful Preludes is a nonprofit where I bring my piano to people who are in hospice or people who are preparing to die. And just for about an hour or so, I sing to them, I play for them. Usually a family member is there and they'll request songs or say, oh, this was her favorite. And I'm telling you, it is the most special thing to be with someone when they are preparing to leave this world, and to be with their families. And I don't take this opportunity, and I say opportunity because it's a gift. I don't take it lightly, and I know that you have to be sensitive. These people, when they are holding vigil next to someone they love, it is raw, and they are vulnerable, and their hearts are cracked wide open. And so I walk into these situations, and I know it sounds weird, but I am so grateful to be there. Like, think about somebody you know who is you just feel like you can never get through to them, you can never break through to find out like who they really are or find their softer side. If you want to see that, watch them sit next to someone they love as they are dying. And this reminds me of what Father said about seeing people as gods, because we all have that deep vulnerability and that love and that passion in us, and it is cracked wide open when we were in that situation. And if you've never been there, know going into it that it's possible for that situation to be really beautiful. And music is one of the ways that we reach that part in someone where we can really get to the heart of who someone is and who they were in their life. I'm telling you, all the song requests, and I think about this when I play in nursing homes sometimes, and all the old jazz standards and the beautiful melodies and the song lyrics, and I'm like, okay, in like 50 years, are people gonna be like requesting Kanye West at their deathbed? Probably not. And I'm just so curious, what's the music that's gonna carry us through our life? And so I'm really cognizant about the music that I listen to, because I know it's gonna become the soundtrack for my life. And I just have to tell you this one story. There are all these just like little beautiful things that happen when I go to do these peaceful prelude projects. And there was this woman who, she heard about me through a friend of a friend, and I showed up and she was sitting with her mother. Her mother was preparing to pass away. And she said the sweetest thing to me when I was getting ready to leave. She said, "What can I pray for you?" Which no one had ever said that to me before. I think that's so beautiful. What can I pray for on your behalf? And I said, well, I just found out I'm pregnant. And she started sobbing, and she said, my mom, the woman who was preparing to die, was known amongst our family and her friends as the woman who always prayed for those who were pregnant. And she had a very close relationship with Saint Gerard. So she hands me this card, this prayer card, for Saint Gerard. Well, I ended up having a miscarriage. And I saw her later, after her mother's funeral, and I told her that, and we've been able to maintain this special relationship because I'm now pregnant again, and I was so excited to tell her that I had been using that prayer card and that I had been thinking about her mom, and what a beautiful relationship was born out of this terribly sad time in her life. And one of the gifts of peaceful preludes is that when you know someone who's preparing to die, you feel like there's nothing you can do, especially if it's your friend's grandmother or your spouse's relative you didn't know very well. So bringing the gift of music to them is so special, in a way you can contribute without being in the way or bringing more food, which of course is wonderful. But the miracle of peaceful preludes is not really in the nonprofit itself. It really is in the potential it has to help people experience beauty and peace in the midst of letting go. And we know that death is the ultimate surrender. And I want to break here and play a song for you because it's one of the songs that I think about. I wrote it, and when we're dealing with funerals and death, people are, and I'm sorry to like bring the mood down with the funeral thing, but people, because it's so regular for me to talk about it because I'm around it a lot, but when I leave a funeral, I always leave with a renewed sense of life. I always leave feeling like I'm ready to take on the things I didn't want to take on. I'm ready to say the things I wasn't sure if I could say. And when we're talking about funerals and death, and it's so much about what that person did when they were alive. And so this song I'm going to play for you is a song that I wrote called My Prayer. And it's a song about the conversation we have with God when we don't know what's next, we don't know what's at the end of the road, but we know that God's in control, and we're asking him to tell us. I set them all aside and ask with a humble heart to know the meaning of my life. So tell me, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to who I surrender my own wants for the glory of your plan, in the name of your Son. So take my fear, Lord, my every ill. I'm ready to use my hands, my words, my life to do your will. So tell me, where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to where would you have me go? What would you have me do? What would you have me say? And to Thanks. You would think I would have my own song memorized, but one of the delightful symptoms of pregnancy is that you don't remember anything. My husband's like shaking his head like, yep, I told her a million things today that she already forgot. It's like walking into a room and forgetting why you went in there, but doing that like 10 to 15 times a day. So just so you know. Okay, so I want to just shift gears now and get into kind of the nitty gritty. So the other half of my, not half, like I'm going to take like another half an hour here, but the other part of what I want to speak to you about is not just me and my miracles that I've experienced, but how can we use our gifts to glorify God? And so what I do a lot of times if I'm trying to problem solve something, I think about kind of the opposite. So I want to just talk about what I think stops us from using our gifts to glorify God. And I think the number one thing is that we have a lack of clarity around what our gifts are and how to use them. And the definition of our purpose here is knowing our gifts and using them. That's what we're here for. So if we have a lack of clarity around that, then that trickles down into everything in our life. So how do we get clear about what our gifts are? And the obvious simple answer is, well, ask yourself what makes you happy and what makes you feel alive. But Father, here's where we're clicking. I think the real thing you have to do is you have to ask God. And God says, ask and receive. So we forget that, and we ask little questions, and we don't get out of our comfort zone. We have to actually ask for what we want. If you've been in a relationship with anyone, you know that it doesn't work when you assume that someone can read your mind, right? So when I was thinking about all this, I remembered when we were little, we had this junk food closet, and it was not a drawer, and it was not a cupboard, it was a closet. And now we refer to it as the diabetes closet because research has shown us that these foods are not sustainable and lead to greater health problems. So we refer to it as the diabetes closet now, but growing up it was like heaven on earth. So when we were little, my 4 siblings and I would sneak into that closet all the time. And my mom would find wrappers, and she would catch us sneaking into the closet, and she would get so mad, and I never understood this. She would get so mad and say, "You didn't ask. Like, you took it, but you didn't ask." And it was all, and I was like, why does she care if we ask? Like, it's there. And I realize now that it wasn't about getting permission, like she was the dictator of the house. It was about like having communication about what do you need, so that she could, say, I understand that you want that, but that's not the best decision because dinner's coming, or whatever the reason. There was like no communication. It was just, we wanted it, so we took it. And with God, it's not about asking permission either, but it's about maintaining the lines of communication. You know that in any conversation, it's not one-sided. My husband was telling me recently, he had a conversation with a friend, and his friend asked him, was kind of checking in, he said, how's your relationship with God? And Tony said, well, I feel like I pray a lot, but I don't really get a lot of answers. And I think that's pretty common. I think that we pray a lot, and we don't listen a lot. And part of any good conversation is that two-way highway. So allowing us to speak to God, to show us the miracles, to put the people in front of us, knowing that it might not always appear the way we expect. It's not going to be an answer on a piece of paper. That he could say no to that particular job or opportunity or house, but he will put you in the right place at the right time. And it's not just about, they say when opportunity comes knocking. I mean, it's not just about like hearing the knock, but you got to be ready with your shoes on and your clutch and be ready to go out the door, right? It's not just about hearing the knock, but you have to be ready to take on those opportunities. And a lot of times they're really scary. They're big things and they're bold ideas, and there's a million people lined up ready to say, you're not the person for that job. That's not gonna work for you, or that's not gonna turn out the way you think it is. I remember when I did this really big, I had this dream to do this big photo shoot with a piano out in a field. And everyone was like, how are you gonna get a piano out in a field? They were like all logically thinking like, this is not possible. This is not gonna work. Well, it did work, and I'm not gonna get into the whole story of it, but for a week, there was a beautiful piano sitting at the top of the hill on 60th and by country, what was that? Omaha Country Club, back behind somewhere, until someone took a hammer to it, which is like a whole different story. But it was beautiful, and it was like, I was the only person who was sure that this was possible. And that's gonna happen to all of us at some point in our life. And so maintaining your conversation, your line of communication with God is is really first and foremost because there are a million people ready to tell you that's not going to work. It's not possible. And we know that through God, all things are possible. So the other component is not only knowing what our gifts are, but how do we get clear about how we use them to do the most good. And as Ryan mentioned, I do about 75 weddings a year. So I could pretty much sit in for a priest in case they didn't show up because I have everything memorized in terms of the script. And there's a clear point in the Catholic Mass in the Catholic wedding Mass, where the priest asks the bride and groom to state their intentions. Have you come here freely? Have you come here freely without reservation to give yourselves to each other in marriage? Is that pretty close? Okay. So, and you guys, every successful company has a mission statement, right? They're clear about what they do and why they do it and who they do it for. So one of the things that's helped me get from being in Omaha and having no idea what I wanted to do with my life to now very confidently saying I make my living as a musician in Omaha, Nebraska, which is like a weird statement to say because it doesn't seem obvious that it could be possible, but it is possible, and I've had to get really clear about what I'm committed to. And I will tell you that if I had to like create a mission statement or say what am I really about, in the creative world we call it like an artist statement, I would say that I'm committed to playing and singing music in a way that allows my listeners to hear God speaking through me. And I'm committed to leaving people feeling loved and connected to each other. And what's so interesting is that whenever I forget this, God course corrects me. So just very recently, I was playing a wedding, and it was one of those weddings where the bride emailed me and she said, my mom's friend wants to sing with you at the wedding. And that is really hard for me because it means more rehearsals. I have no idea. Does this person know what they're doing? How is this going to go? How is this going to reflect on me whenever it's, and so of course I get into, well, this is my career. This is what I do. I'm representing myself. Like if this goes bad, it's all on me. So we start singing the Lamb of God. And originally I was going to sing all the Mass parts. Well, she starts singing with me and I'm just like, why is she singing with me? I know it's just the Lamb of God, but like I'm singing one that she doesn't really know, and how's this going to go? Like literally 2 seconds into the song, I open my mouth and a bug flies in my mouth and I start choking. And she continues to sing. And had she not been singing with me, it would have been a disaster because then there's like half of a Lamb of God and it's weird and I'm choking, but it would have been so awkward. And I was like, okay, got it, message received, it's not about me. And that happens to me all the time. Like anytime I sit down at the piano, even to play for church, and I'm like, oh, I love playing at this piano. The sound system's great. I have the perfect song for offertory. I'm just going to kill it. This Mass is going to be so great. And then inevitably, I will hit a very wrong note. I will forget the lyrics to something. Like something will happen where God will for lack of a better reference, like slap me across the face and be like, wake up, this is not about you. And so in the work that I do, I'm really, really forced, especially when you're doing weddings and you're playing for sacraments and you're playing for people when they're dying. I mean, these are very vulnerable, special moments. I'm very, very clear about the fact that it's not about me. And so what I'm getting at is that when you have to state your intention, you have to be clear about what is it that you're doing this job or this what's this relationship, like what you have to get clear about what your intentions are, and it makes a huge difference. And you have to make a distinction. This is a very important distinction for me between being committed to something and being attached to something. When we are attached to things, attachment is very me-driven. So like the story of the bug in the mouth, it's very much like I'm attached to looking good. I'm attached to sounding good. I'm attached to having people come up to me after this wedding and ask for my card so I can get more business. Like, it's very me-driven, and you get this sense of like desperation, or there's some sort of obligation involved. And like an example, a lot of us are attached to being right about something. And you know that when you're in a conversation with someone and you're trying to be right about it, you feel tense, you get aggressive, you get defensive. So the opposite of that is to be committed. And commitments are others-driven. They leave you feeling empowered and confident. There's a softening. There's this notion of swimming with the current instead of against it. And I want to tell you one more story that kind of drives this point home. Sort of a low point in my career was when I was playing a lot of nursing homes. And it was only a low point for me because it involved schlepping my equipment everywhere and not getting paid very much. And then this story really sums it up. So I was playing at a nursing home, and I was playing for an hour, and very close to the end of the hour, this woman in the very back of the room, she keeps raising her hand and she keeps going like this to me. And I'm like, okay, I will only play 2 more songs. And then she just keeps doing this. And I was like, okay, 2 minutes, that's it. Like, I'm almost done. I can't leave early. Like, they've asked me to play for this whole hour. Well, she is intense back there, just going away with this. I don't know what this means anymore at this point. And she walks up to me at the end and she says, I was trying to tell you that your legs were apart. And she goes, the man in the front row was staring right up your skirt. And I was like, lady, he's been asleep for 30 minutes. Like, I didn't say that, but I was like, so it was a low point because I left that gig after schlepping my equipment back to my car and not being paid very much, and finding out that not only were people asleep for half the time that I was playing, but some of them were just pissed at me the whole time because I apparently had my legs apart, which I didn't. But hence why I now use a modesty sheath, so that there's no chance of that happening ever again. But I remember I walked out to my car after, and I sat there, and I was just like, okay, God, this isn't working. This is not making me happy. It's not making them happy, obviously. And I had to get really clear about what it is that I wanted to do. And I think the term fake it till you make it really applies here. I started applying this, this practice. Like when what do I want it to feel like when I wake up in the morning as whatever it is I said I wanted to be as a professional musician? What does that look like in my day-to-day? How does that feel in every situation? And it really forces you to get clear about what it is that you want to be doing. What does it look like? What does it feel like? Who are the people that you surround yourself with? And so my relationships started to change. The opportunities, the clients that I was attracting started to change. And my business was being built right before my eyes. And there's this quote, leap and the net will appear. So we think we have to have it all figured out. We think we have to know what's on the other end of the rope. We have to know where we're going and what it looks like. And we don't. That is the essence of our relationship with God. Hand it off. Let Him do the heavy lifting. There will be bumps in the road, but perspective is everything. I see my bumps in the road as speed bumps as opposed to potholes. The speed bump, an opportunity to go, okay, slow down, do a little more listening, and reevaluate. And every day is an opportunity to do that. So I have another song, but I'd like that to be what we close with. So before I do that, I want to ask you if you have any questions or if you want to engage in any conversation here. So this is Open the Eyes of My Heart, and I just really love this song because it's so simple, and it really speaks to what Father mentioned, you know, opening our hearts to what God has in store for us. Again, letting go of thinking that we have to figure it all out. Being open to what it is that God has in store for us.
Open